What's up, everybody? What's up? Grab a glass, bottle, cup, or sit down, shut the fuck up, and hopefully you're prepared to have some fun and get a little fucked up with your boys. Big Mike, aka Big ZZ, aka my dog Michael, and then your boy McDank, aka Young Loon, aka Kyle. And today we'll be talking about the best hip-hop albums of the past decade, which is 2010 for 2020 for you motherfuckers that don't know what 10 years is. So, I think we're going to be talking about this for the next, 24, 32, maybe 30?
I'm thinking maybe 40.
40, oh yeah. Alright, we're going to be talking about this for the next 40 ounces of hip-hop.
So how about we set some context for these people? I'll let them know how it got started. One day last year, I'm kind of bored at work, and whenever I was bored at work, a piece of paper I got there, I would always just make lists, right? As stupid as it sounds. And of course, I'm a big hip hop guy. I'm starting to write down my favorite albums from the decade, right? And then it hits me. I'm like, holy shit, this decade's ending. This decade's ending soon. And so, that's a list in itself, right? And then basically, I just started discussing it with Kyle, who's been my boy since the 4th grade. He's always been my go-to hip-hop guy. That's who I talk to about hip-hop always. And it kind of got to the point where, my personal fulfillment was based on completing this list, because I'm like, I got to figure out what the 20 best albums of this decade are. And put a lot of thought into it, and next thing you know, we realized we got to make a podcast out of it after how much thought we put into it, right?
Of course, my G. It's like we went from, at first we were just going to publish it and put it on Twitter or whatever social media platform. Something to show.
Maybe a blog.
Maybe go that far. But it felt like it was just unfulfilling to do just that. They thought we could make this more memorable by making a podcast. It's like, don't you agree?
You gotta discuss it, right? That's what. Yeah.
That's a fact. Well, now that's out the way, I hope everyone got their 40s and maybe even a couple shorties with them, because we're about to pull up some 40 ounces.
First episode, honorable mentions. I feel like we gotta start with albums that, when we were making the list originally, before we were revisiting all of them, ones that you thought were going to make the list, but then going back, making the list, you realized it wasn't going to make the cut.
No, I agree. There's a bunch of fallen soldiers out there, and that's what this episode is dedicated for, the honorable mentions. And I think a good starting point for one that I think both of us had was actually some of our favorite Beast Coast rappers, Flatbush Zombies.
Yeah.
Project Better Off Dead. Michael, you want to talk about that for a little?
Yeah, I remember when I made my original top 20 list, I probably had it 12, 13, 14. I had it decently high, because it's always been one of my favorite mixtapes. And I think I just got to a point when I was re-listening to it, when I realized I really only love half of the album. And I guess, some albums you don't listen to full always. Maybe you only listen to the songs that were memorable to you. And so I kind of just realized it was always just American Pie and My Team Supreme and 222, Palm Trees. I can keep going because it's a long album and I love half of it.
It's 22 tracks deep.
I just realized, damn, really 22?
Yeah, bro.
I just realized it had too much filler for me to put in the top 20.
That is true. And the thing is that I remember it so well because American Pie, honestly, and coming off of drugs and the mixtape prior to this.
Yeah.
I like Flatbush, but I wasn't huge on them. But that intro with American Pie kind of set the tone for Flatbush Zombies going forward, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because you start off with American with the triple K. You start off, I'm like, okay, is it gonna be
you knew what you were getting into?
Yeah. I was like, all right, how far are we gonna go with this, and how far is this gonna be pulled off right? And well, I'll be damned, they did well, they did great. And honestly, songs like that 222, Palm Trees, of course.
Raz.
And also I gotta give a shout out to Club Soda, because pop up at your funeral shirtless and spit on your hearse, bitch. You're worthless. It's like, what?
Meet your maker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Put sugar in the vegetable. She grew up in the gutter. Like,
yeah,
who the fuck
Bronson verse. Yeah.
Who the fuck did actually Bronson think he was?
Yeah.
But that project, even though it had great tracks like that, it was, upon revisiting, something that I realized was really, the first half was great. I would say, maybe first quarter of the project, but the filler tracks in between were very weak, especially in comparison to some of these very strong highlights.
Yeah, I mean, make it an EP, cut out the filler, and it's already a classic, but then you're talking about one of the best mixtapes of the decade.
Easily. And
I'm always going to show love. They're one of my favorite rap groups still. Michi Darko, I still think, is one of the most talented rappers out there, but I thought I was going to make the list because of the classics on there that I love, that you love, but too much filler, just couldn't make the cut.
Too true. Speaking couldn't make the cut, let's talk about some clippings. And to me, clipping,
just to clarify, clipping by clipping.
Yes, that's very true.
Yeah,
gotta clarify, because even though they have released several projects over the decade, Riggy chose to go with clipping because it was the first and is also the most memorable in my opinion.
It was their breakout.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. So, and seeing what Daveed Diggs did with that lyrically was pretty impressive and always stood out to me. Especially that intro. The intro going to Body and Blood is always going to be one of my favorite transitions the past decade.
If you're talking about clipping, you're going to talk about the industrial, experimental production on it, right? But the first thing you mentioned was Daveed, right? And I think he's what makes it such a great album, so much to the point that it almost made our top 20, was his rapping. Like, he's great at storytelling, right? And he can flow super fast. Like, on half the tracks, he's going super fast, right? And it's not like Clipping is an album that gets recognized just because it's experimental. And I think some people feel that way. They're like, oh, the dudes who rap over a dog whistle or an alarm clock, right? And that's what makes them unique. But what makes it good is Daveed Diggs' rapping.
Of course. Daveed is what I consider what Joyner Lucas dreams he can be.
Damn.
Honestly, but if you listen to a lot of Joyner's projects, what type of flow does he go for? The
fast and storytelling.
Exactly, but it's not creative enough or as picturesque, and the imagery is incomparable. You can't. Daveed is in a class of his own if you compare it to Joyner. So I think just being on that alone gave them a solid spot, a solid chance of being in the top 20, but similar
I thought music videos enhanced my opinion of the album.
Definitely.
Damn near half the album. Work, Inside Out, I know. Get Up did, Story 2 did.
Yeah, Story 2 was fire.
Yeah, the music videos, they really added to the experience of the album.
And I think that carried throughout their other projects as well. But it's still a common thing, I feel like, with a clipping project is that even though it has some very standout songs and very great experimental things that I would want to revisit, some things I just don't find myself revisiting very often. Like, Daveed is still rapping, his lyrical potency is always there. It's just, is this enjoyable to the point that I'm going to revisit it 10 years down the line? Yeah. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. One for me was 1999 Joey Badass.
Classic.
Yeah, it's all of these are classics, right? But when I think 1999, I think here's this kid, right? He's only 17 years old when it came out, right? And it was huge in that no one knew Pro Era before, right? And I mean, obviously Joey's been big, but Pro Era got big, and then it's this great mixtape. A lot of the I mean, you got like MF Doom beats and stuff, right? And you got this 90s feel, but it's all done by like this 17-year-old. This guy who's supposed to be, I don't know, making drill music or some stupid crap like that, right? Like, it's a 17-year-old.
Yeah, it's the thing about 1999 that always stood out to me is how, even though I've always like grown up listening to 90s era hip hop and like classic New York rap,
yeah,
it was refreshing to hear that type of New York, that type of hip hop and rapping coming from someone my age, like around my age, and like it also sparked a revival in the classic New York style hip hop, because in the time, I guess the North, I'd say New York hip hop was kind of losing its identity in a sense. There's people like Dave East, there's people like Jim Jones, there's other artists. There's also like the Rock Marcianos and whatnot. But
and then the Beast Coast kind of side subgenre.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then that, but with with Joey, it was like taking it back to the essence of it, and it was done on a level that was incredibly impressive, and even going over and even paying homage to prior artists like MF Doom beats, like MF Doom with his beats and whatnot, to such a degree that it even later on, some of these songs, some of these homages will not deserve, but they garnered homages of themselves with J. Cole doing things like False Prophets and whatnot. And other artists find artists doing remixing Waves.
Yeah,
1,000 times over.
Yeah.
So,
and a lot of other young artists at the time weren't really making conspiracy, and even though it was more so capital Steez than Joey, right? But still, not a lot of other people were making kind of conspiracy, anti-government stuff. Yeah. I mean, for his age, I know like Bishop Nehru, he was kind of big at the time too, but no one really got big doing the kind of music that Joey was doing.
No, Joey was in a unique position, to say the least.
Yeah. Another one for me was People Hear What They See by Oddisee. And like, I know you were kind of making fun of me a little bit for having it, but like, we both agree it's really good. In retrospect, I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe it didn't really have a chance of making the top 20. But like, in my mind, I've always viewed it as a really important album. And not just because Oddisee is one of my favorite rappers, but I think it's important because for two reasons. I think Mellow Music Group, it kind of like, in my opinion, it kind of ran underground hip hop as a label for like, I don't know, 4-year stretch, like 2012 to 2016.
Yes.
And who's the most notable guy from Mellow Music, right? Oddisee. And then also just the fact that he was kind of known, but mostly as a producer at that point, right? So kind of like this Kanye-esque career arc, right? But to me, that album, like, he was rapping his ass off, right? And I feel like it came out and it immediately put him in that discussion of like
best rapping and rapper producers.
Yeah, with Big KRIT, Childish, Gambino, J. Cole. Like, it put him in that discussion. And since then, I think he's been one of the most consistent rappers as far as putting out music. But People Hear What They See, I always thought it was his best. And I don't know, the takeaway I've always had with it was the first track, Ready to Rock.
Yes.
Because if that's like your first time hearing Oddisee rap, like maybe you listened to Diamond District before that or whatever, right? But if that's your first time hearing him rap and it gets to that second verse where he's like, take a little bit of time, and he starts rapping super fast, right? Like, you're like, holy cow, this guy is rapping his ass off.
He's rapping his ass off, as well as he's one of those artists that can rap their ass off as well as not lose the potency of their lyrics, or maybe like seems like they're trying to compress too much in the cadence, like in their flow, and try to change it all just for the sake of keeping the cadence, you know?
Yeah.
He really solidified himself as a prominent dual threat with this album.
Yeah, I mean, you listen to interviews with him, he talks about being a complete artist and how it's not about the rap, it's not about the beats, it's about the music. Like, you hear him say stuff like that.
Yes.
And I'm not going to try to pretend like I know about music stuff, but it's clear with him. He knows what he's doing with making music.
I agree. And someone I think also knows what he's doing, just a tad bit, is Mr. Jay-Z, Hove, Sean Carter, whatever the hell you want to call him.
Yeah.
And I think one of the ones that could be a surprise to some of you that didn't make the list was 444. And to me, 444, is still, in my opinion, even though it didn't make the list, is one of the best comebacks and evolutionary stories in hip hop.
Yeah.
In my opinion, because it shows Jay-Z finally the stretch of over 20 years in the game.
Yeah.
Reflecting upon all that's brought him here, like to the point of making himself so vulnerable in the form of songs like Marcy Me, Legacy, Gloria. So he makes references and allusions to this throughout the years, but to like different aspects of his life throughout the years, but he's never displayed it or bared it as truthfully and honestly as this before, which is very interesting to see from someone that was one of the leading braggadocious rappers, of the 90s and early 2000s.
And that's what makes it such a notable old man veteran album, is the fact that it's not just a good album that he put out at an old age. Like, he wrote it, the composition of it is about him being an old man veteran rapper.
Right.
That's what makes it good. And I guess like early in the decade he had Watch the Throne, and that was kind of like already a celebration.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't an old man celebration record, it's more like an old man reflective record, like you said.
Yeah, it was interesting to see, because also we don't get many artists that have been in the game as long as him, like to even get to the point that we would see this and celebrate this on such a grand stand.
Yeah,
like it'll be a cool case study later down the line, even to see like, oh, this is the different stages of Jay-Z's career, because he's not done making music, but
yeah,
it's going to be interesting. Where does he go from here?
It took people by surprise too, I think, because I think Magna Carta, I don't know if anyone liked it.
It was disappointing, but the first track starting off 444 with Killer Jay-Z is like, and that being one of your singles, it's pretty interesting. It was pretty jarring to hear from Hove. It almost took you back to like a takeover type days. Mm-hmm. And I think, just touch one last thing on like vulnerability. It's literally, we talk about the man who's known for the Rock Dynasty. Yeah. It's literally, this album is like the emperor taking off his crown. Like, all right, yo, I know I'm supposed to be this big, like, I'm the emperor, I'm the leader of this situation, but I am still a man. Like, I am still flawed. It was interesting to see a vulnerable king, I guess.
I don't know. You got any that made your personal top 20 list? I guess for context, we should mention that this top 20, it's not my list, it's not Kyle's list, it's our list. Yeah. It's a hybrid of two lists that we independently made. So
yep, we had to compromise, and we had to talk about, and some of the choices that we personally had, we thought we still should highlight, and that didn't make the list. Yeah. And I know one for myself was Daytona, and Daytona, everyone knows by now, it's Pusha T's latest album. It was a 7-track project, all executive produced by Kanye West. Yeah. And to me, it was the closest return to form of Clip's era Pusha T, and honestly, pre-808's era Kanye West production.
Yeah. I mean, we just talked about it with Jay-Z, Old Man Records, right? Like, how old do you think Pusha T was when this came out? Take a guess.
He gotta be 40 something.
He was 41.
Yeah.
But no one talks about Pusha T like this veteran, right?
Right.
And like I've even seen pictures where it's like, I think it's the Ninja Turtles, and it's Kanye as good music, and he's like the master, and he's got the Ninja Turtles following him.
Oh, you got like Master Splinter in the middle.
Yeah, and he's got the good music guys like Big Sean, whoever, right? But one of them's Pusha T, and it's like the most insulting thing ever, right? And yeah, I like Daytona because I kind of view it as an old man veteran solidifying his legacy type record. Like, here's this 41-year-old. Clips has been around since the 90s, but his solo career, I guess not until 2010 maybe, that he signed with Good Music.
Has been rough, to say the least.
Yeah, and for the first time he put out something great, and it's almost ironic that's this small 7-track sample, but I mean, it's some of the best rapping he's had in his career. I think one thing that people will always remember about it is just the fact that it was produced by Kanye, right?
Yes.
I mean, we all love Kanye as a producer, and it came in the midst of Kanye releasing all these 7-track EPs, right? Obviously, Kids See Ghosts, but he did one for Nas with Nasir.
Tiana Taylor.
Yeah.
Himself.
Yeah, himself. Yeah.
He had went almost 2 months straight releasing albums, the most compact albums, but some of these artists' best work, bar Nas.
Yeah. We just won't mention that one. Yeah, talking about old man records.
It's like, Nas, why?
Yeah.
But also a big point to this album, big plus to this album, I think also a big solidifying point is how it kicked off the powder keg of the beef with Drake.
Yeah.
And it was because the song Infrared, for those who may not know, Infrared was a direct diss to Lil Wayne, to Birdman, to Drake, the entire Young Money camp, essentially, and well, Cash Money, Young Money camp. But it was the tipping point because these little sneak disses have been going on for quite some time, actually, between Drake and
ever since Exodus 23:1, I think is the Bible verse. Yeah, which is
interesting that it took this long for this to kind of come to a head. But the fact that this old man rapper is taking arguably the most, I wouldn't say prolific, but the biggest pop star on the planet, amongst one of them at least, on straight head on, no bars, I want all the smoke. At 41 years old.
There's no way to sugarcoat it. He took on Drake.
And he said, and Drake replied and tried to challenge the old bull. But
I think the next day he replied.
I think it's like, it might have been the next day or two. Yeah. He did the Duppy song, and then didn't he do something else as well?
I think it was just one song.
It was just Duppy?
Yeah.
Man, and then Pusha T just solidifies himself in hip-hop history by defaming Drake's name.
Do you think it was calculated? Like, because Exodus happened in 2012, right? Mm-hmm. And Lil Wayne responded with Ghoulish.
Yeah.
And I remember Pusha T, he called it trash, right? Like, I think he went on the radio and was like, he told me my head's up my ass, I'm gonna have to headbutt him. And he like laughed at it and he called it trash, right? And it kind of ended there, I feel like, except for like little sneak disses. So it's like, I almost feel like Pusha T had this information about Drake having a secret son or whatever. I feel like he had that, and he was like, I just can't come out with that. Like, I need to diss him a little bit harder this time, make him come back with the diss track, and then I can come back with the diss track that just ends it.
I'm pretty sure that was the case, because the way he described it in the Joe Budden podcast, when he's like how he got the information, he's like, oh, he thought he got this information from someone else from Drake's camp, and it ended up being 40 of all people. Like, the way he spoke about it seemed like it was pretty far past tense. So it wasn't Kanye. He was like, oh, it's not Kanye. It was actually your man's. So I'm pretty sure Pusha T and Ye, being the businessman and the people that know how to play into the hype of the music industry and how to play up the hype, they definitely thought about this. Pusha definitely, and someone who's a rap veteran, which also shows his skill and his age in the game and his acumen for it, because he knew, he's like, all right, this guy has a soft spot. This guy is known to have this ego and have this ego that you could easily push and temper it with. I'm gonna use that and play that up. And I don't think he even was. He was prepared for Drake was going to reply, but I don't think he truly knew. I don't think he was gambling everything on Drake replying to that level. Yeah. Because the diss is the diss, and it's already good. Infrared is already a good diss. It's just because the beat's good, his delivery's on is good. It's pretty cut to the bone. Yeah. Even without saying names exactly, it's pretty.
I guess he mentions Quentin Miller, right? And at that point, you know who he's talking about.
Yeah. But even without just being like, fuck Drake, like straight up, it was very. I think he's like, all right, even without Drake responding, because it is a gamble. You don't know what Aubrey was going to do. Yeah. So.
And Drake's a good diss track writer, too. I think. Even Duppy was good, right? So
yeah, Duppy was good. If it wasn't going against Pusha T, because the thing about Duppy I hold against is that it was more like it wasn't focused. Like even though Pusha's wasn't as focused, it was still when he was attacking them, it was pretty cut to the bone. Yeah, Duppy was like, "Yo, Kanye ain't say nothing, but I'm gonna just bring up a lot of Kanye." Yeah, with Infrared, he's like, hey, Wayne and them have been dissing me for a minute, so I'm gonna address everything, everyone. Yeah. Him bringing the way Drake brought Ye into it is kind of odd. Yeah. Like, and then the story of Added Dawn happened, and there's nothing left after that.
Yeah, great album. Great Legacy vibe. Definitely gonna be amplified by the dissing, though.
Definitely. Yeah. So what's something you had on your list?
One that was on my list? Yeah, I had Imperial by Denzel Curry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people don't even consider it to be his best album, right? But for me, it's probably the one that I listen to the most. And maybe it's because I view it kind of as his breakout album, even though I know you and I have been big fans ever since N64. I feel like when Imperial came out, that's when he was big in my mind. I mean, I guess at that point, Ultimate had been out for a little bit, right? And that came out on Planet Shrooms. Right. But I just felt like, because it's pretty brief too. It's like maybe 10 tracks, right? And I just feel like each of the 10 tracks, he's just, and it's pretty similar. He's using the same loud, aggressive, fast flows, but like it just doesn't stop. Like he brings it on every track, and there's not a single track on there that I dislike. And if there's an album that you think is close to perfect in that way, how could I not put it on my list?
I totally agree. I totally understand, my guy. Because even though I can't say the same, I don't dislike. I don't like. Even though I can't say the same, there's no track that I dislike. I will say that he did come hard, and that was one of the most consistent performances I think Denzel's had in his career. Yeah, and because songs like Zenith, songs like Sick and Tired, Nadia, Goog, Story No Title. Yeah, I used to play Story No Title for so dang much, but he really had. It was a very consistent performance. I respect the performance, but I do think I couldn't put it in my top 20 because I think he had even better performances down the line.
If anything, that's a testament to how great of an artist he is the fact that so many people argue what his best album is. I see some people argue for N64 still.
Yeah, same. Very, very true.
And then another album I had in my top 20 pretty similar to what we had to say about Imperial was Floss by Injury Reserve.
Yeah.
It's one that a lot of people might think there's better out there by them. And I get it. So, I mean, it's similar to Imperial because Floss that's Injury Reserve's breakout album. It's the first album I heard by them. I hadn't heard Live from the Dentist Office when that came out. So for Floss, it's the first time I heard them, and they're definitely unique in the artistry that they have. It felt refreshing. It felt new. I mean, obviously new in the sense that I hadn't heard them before, but
yeah.
They say it ain't jazz rap, but like the jazz rap, and then just the samples, all of it was really refreshing. And I think I probably had it like 20 or 19 on my list.
Yeah, when it came to Injury Reserve's Floss, for me, it was definitely when I first came up with the list, I thought it would be a top contender, like in my list. I'm like, okay, because I'm just gonna go ahead and say like Floss and Floss, Drive Like It's Stolen, and the latest Injury Reserve. I enjoyed all three of those projects thoroughly.
Yeah,
but Floss songs like Oh Shit, Bad Boys, freaking S on My Chest, like
all this money.
It was for when we talk about like with Imperial, them just going so hard from start to finish. It's pretty hard to. It's hard to discredit it or to even say like, oh, it's not worthy of being on the list, because someone could be like, oh, someone could prefer that over their later projects. But I think my one gripe with Floss was some of the songs ran together and was, even though there was diversity throughout the project, I think some of the flows got a little too complacent.
Gotcha.
It's like, do you agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I can see that. And obviously I'm cool with the final list we had, so that should tell you something, right?
Yeah. One that we had, well, one I had personally was Flower Boy.
Yeah. And
Flower Boy to me is, well, I'm gonna preface this with Flower Boy or Igor, because I consider both quality, but kind of both exploring similar sides, but just kind of evolutionary steps. Like which step in the evolution do you want? It's almost like a Digimon. It's like, do you want to go? Do you want to go one level over? Do you want a War Greymon? Do you want to?
Well, for Tyler, I think that's a pretty big evolution from Goblin or from, I guess Wolf was after it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big evolution.
Humongous. Especially, it's like coming from Bastard to Flower Boy and Igor is.
And the Odd Future tapes in between.
And the Odd Future tapes in between. Yeah, because OF tape, which we started to see glimmers of like what Tyler was capable of, and kind of some of the more soulful sounds that he did sound at home at. It was just with Flower Boy and Igor, it was essentially Tyler adapting these sounds and finally actually diving headfirst into them.
He moved on from the old personality by that point.
Yeah, he was done with that persona, even though it's still part of that level of energy and that kind of uncontrollable and kind of that uncontrolled, that man that has so much to give and so much to say, that's almost like it's just like a force to be reckoned with. To me, like Igor is essentially like to compare it to like a game. Igor is Cherry Bomb's HD remake ran on the Flower Boy engine, and Flower Boy is like the same thing for Wolf, but on a Cherry Bomb, but it's still pulling from Cherry Bomb.
Yeah. And
even some of the OF tapes, I think of songs like Analog Part 2 and whatnot, that I think he started to really dabble into express unabashedly his more sensitive side of things, which end up being a really refreshing thing to hear. It's him kind of paying homage more often to his influences more openly.
So you had both Flower Boy and Igor in your top 20?
I had them in my potential candidate list.
Okay.
So I listened to both of them.
Gotcha.
But like upon revisiting both, I'm like, I kind of don't. Either one could have taken it. It was just whichever one I preferred.
I think it was Flower Boy.
I had Flower Boy on there.
Yeah.
But it was like I've been listening to Igor a lot more. So I'm like, oh, I do play Igor more than Flower Boy, but maybe just because,
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I think another one I had on there was Faces by Mac Miller.
Yeah, I remember that.
And Faces to me was interesting because it's like the first follow-up from watching movies with the sound off, which to me actually made me into a Mac Miller fan. Because for the longest time I was not. Even though the songs were fun, they were very simple tunes I could just play and not really think too much about. I love the song Kool-Aid and Frozen Pizza. It's just stupid and fun, but it's simple vibe song, almost like some Cooking Soul sounding production. But with Faces and with watching movies with the sound off, the shift in tone and the shift in how he the shift in introspection from Mac Miller and the shift in how the sounds that he would go for instead of being just comfortable, simple trap rap or like party rap.
More like party rap, I guess. Yeah.
He seemed like he was actually carving out a niche of his own, or at least exploring a more unique sound to himself rather than that.
Yeah.
And the way I see with Faces is it started to answer the question that he would propose on actually Good AM. It's like, who the fuck is Mac Miller?
Yeah. And Faces was probably the druggiest. I don't know. I know it's insensitive to say it like that in retrospect, but it felt like the druggiest he had been, but also felt like the most kind of lyrical he had ever been at that point too.
Yeah, his song Angel Dust. Just a bit of Angel Dust. It's like, druggy is not I want to say it's a slight.
Yeah.
In this regard.
Yeah, New Faces Volume 2. That was always my favorite track from there with Earl Sweatshirt.
Oh, great verses.
Yeah, and then the Mac Miller verse is classic, and some of the lyrics too in retrospect, like I said.
Yeah.
It feels a little different now.
Yeah. R.I.P. Mac Miller.
Yeah, rest in peace. Gone too soon.
I think
that's all the ones that we had on our personal list that didn't make it, right?
Yeah.
So you got any just any good old shout outs?
Gotta give a shout out to the female representation when it comes to this hip hop game. I gotta shout out to Telephone by Noname Gypsy.
Yeah.
Just Noname. It stood out to me because compared to other prominent female artists at the time, it was a more subdued take and more kind of retro vibe to rapping and the music that was being kind of pushed at the time, because it reminds of something like more bombastic, like Nicki Minaj or something. It's night and day. Granted, there's still like the flow trees and rhapsodies out there like we could listen to, but No Name's style mixing with that, also the kind of Chance the Rapper.
It's a very Chicago album.
Exactly.
Smino, Chance the Rapper, all those guys.
Saba,
they had that sound going strong at that point, and she did it perfectly.
Yeah, she showed a way how to. She made her own lane, and she kind of defined her own narrative, and she defined herself in a better way, more than me just saying, "Oh, that's the girl from The Waters."
Yeah, on Comfortable. Yeah. Or on Coloring Book too, she appeared on a track.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, they only knew her for those two songs by that point.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know for me, two that really stuck out to me were Return of Forever and Because the Internet by Big KRIT, and then by Childish Gambino. And what makes them so notable to me is if you think about the top rappers from this past decade, you can't not discuss Childish, Gambino, and Big KRIT, right? Especially for the first half of the decade. You think about Big KRIT, he went from 2010 to 2013. He went KRIT Was Here, Return of Forever, Forever in a Day, King Remembered in Time, and then with his debut album mixed in there. And then for Gambino, he went Cul-de-sac, Camp, Royalty, Because of the Internet, right? These dudes were dominating the first half of the decade. They're putting out great music year after year. And it feels almost kind of wrong to not have them in a top 20 list, because it's these dudes were rap this decade. They were such a huge part of it that part of me, I felt kind of guilty not having them in the list. But it's not like I'm just picking because the internet and in Return of Forever just because that's what I think their two best projects are, and it's probably what most people agree their two best projects are. But I don't know, if the list extended to top 30, I bet you both would make that list.
I totally agree, and going back to the rapper and producer element that we spoke about earlier, these two are amongst the most prominent, and they did it on such an extreme level, such a great level that
they're great at both sides of it.
Yeah, they really exemplified what artists can do, and they did it in such different manners that I was oh wow, Gambino's producing on, you hear a song like Pink Toes, then you hear a song like Forever in a Day, totally different opposite spectrum, but totally great songs.
Yeah,
it's really great to have that during this past decade.
Yeah,
I feel it led the way for a lot of other artists.
And I think they get kind of those projects and maybe what they did in the first half of the decade. I think it gets a little underappreciated in the time being, just because maybe they haven't been as prominent in the second half of the decade. But I mean, they were so good to start off the decade.
I do agree. And I think it also created a sense, it set the bar a little high for them and kind of made a bit of a bias against later projects, because
always happens.
Yeah, because people are now gonna be wow, I want, because of the internet again, I want this song from Royalty back. Bro, give me another Bonfire, Gambino, or give me another freaking give me another Booby Miles, give me another, you're gonna ask for tracks. People are gonna look back for those type of tracks. Dreaming. Yeah. People are gonna look back for certain tracks that the artists don't. They already done that. They already moved past that. So now when you have a Awaken My Love, or you have a King Remembered in Time, or whatever follows suit.
Yeah, Forever is a mighty long time. That was probably his best since then. Yeah.
Yes. Because once you have those projects, it's similar, but people are still always going to look back to those other ones.
Yeah.
It may be to an unfair degree.
Yeah. And I think for similar reasons, we have to shout out Milo. Yes. And obviously not as big as Big KRIT and Gambino ever were, but I know he's one of my favorite rappers of the past decade. I know he's one of your favorite rappers of the past decade. The problem I had with Milo was I always have such a hard time just picking my favorite album from him. Some guys, they may not be one of the best rappers from the past decade, but they have that one project that's great. And for Milo, I don't think he has one that sticks out.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because when I was initially thought about this list, I put Milo's name down, but I didn't have a project next to it.
Yeah, same.
Because you could pick from, and talking about artists that changed throughout the decade.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, Milo, going from I Wish My Brother Rob Was Here, which was a very strong, in my opinion, breakout mixtape, and a unique experience to listen to, with songs Lonely Owl.
Yeah.
When it's wow,
it's sad, it's reflective, at times it's kind of childish.
Yeah.
Spoken word.
Yeah, that's one of the major things with Milo, and I kind of want to compare him to, he's almost like Noname, in the sense of Noname's flow and her approach to rapping is more almost of a freeform poet, or a slam poet rather than a traditional rapper. And Milo, with his fusion of like philosophical and historical facts and in the midst of being braggadocio, like I stand over with this cape and this lightning like Dooku, is like, that's a weird mixture. Or like talk about my Yakabing scene, like he provided very unique experiences throughout the decade and very unique approaches to getting similar messages across, but with a lyrical density that never came off as kind of over the top or very bloated.
Yeah.
He has a very interesting style that I think it doesn't get enough recognition.
Yeah. And he keeps that introspection throughout his career, but like you said, it evolved. He definitely got more activist, more less spoken word, more traditional flow as time went on.
Also his beat selection.
Yeah, he started making beats a little bit too, right? So you got a favorite Milo project? If we had to pick one for honorable mention, what would you pick?
I'm going. I want to say, because I like things that happen that day / things that happen at night, but Scallops Hotel.
Because I think it's Plain Speaking. I've come to the conclusion recently that Plain Speaking is my favorite. And like you said, it's weird because that's a Scallops Hotel project.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want to say that's my favorite Milo, but it just might be. But Who Told You to Think was also something I really like. Who Told You to Think.
Yeah, I mean, like, everything he's released is so good.
Yeah, but I would probably personally, the albums I listen to the most would either be Plain Speaking, Who Told You to Think, or honestly, Things That Happen in the Day, Things That Happen at Night, because I love Legends of the Hidden Temple. It's like Pizzicato.
Folk Metaphysics.
Yep, Folk Metaphysics. Great songs.
Well, I have one more guy who I kind of group in with the notable rapper of the decade, and it's probably an understatement to call Drake a notable rapper from the decade, because in a lot of cases he's like the rapper of the decade as far as fame goes, right? And popularity, influence, and I mean, you got to give him some recognition too. He's a good rapper too. Take Care is his classic, right? I think most people agree with that. Yes. If they don't agree with that, they'll probably say Nothing Was the Same. Or maybe even If You're Reading This Too Late, which, even though that wasn't initially an album, it was still kind of morphed into being an album. Yeah. I mean, I had If You're Reading This, It's Too Late on my honorable mentions list. Because even though I think Take Care is Drake's classic, I've always thought If You're Reading This, It's Too Late. That's always been my favorite project by him. I just remember like when it came out, it was like, oh, Drake released a mixtape. Like, oh, he hadn't done that since So Far Gone. And like in retrospect, it's funny because it's clearly an album, right? Yeah. And it came out of nowhere too, without any announcement. And I guess he just did that again recently, right? Yeah, with Dark Lane demos. Yeah, and I remember it broke Spotify's streaming record in a day, or like the first week, some kind of streaming record it had. And I just remember how big it was as a surprise, but just the album itself, from like the first 5 or so tracks, like Legend. Energy, Know Yourself, 10 Bands, No Tellin'. Like, I love those songs. Then you get on to later with Six God and Six Man. Like, to me, that's like peak Drake. Yes, I would definitely agree. I also like the more, but even on this project, like If You're Reading This Too Late, even though I do feel like Take Care is his classic, partially because how complete I feel like it sounds, both commercially and while retaining Drake's appeal of lyricism and singing ability, like in the singing
morphing, because even though I do think even though I do think Drake evolved in like his singing ability, because he going from So Far Gone, just even if you're reading this too late, songs like Jungle compared to Bria's Interlude, his singing a little bit, his singing increased by a tremendous, like singing capability increased by a tremendous amount. I think is really notable. And even though Drake is probably the artist of the past decade, like the most, I wouldn't say the most influential. He may be one of the most influential artists of the past decade. Yeah. The only other person I could kind of maybe debate that with would be
Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah. Kendrick.
I mean, that's
Kendrick, Cole, Drake.
It's those three guys for the past decade.
It's right? Like, if you don't want to go into like trap side of things, then I'd throw in like a Gucci or it is, man. It's like Gucci and Little B, just for the sense of internet flair and kind of making things that are viral songs. Yeah, for the culture. Yeah. But Drake, even though he had this classic project with Take Care, when compared to other projects, it doesn't age as well as I thought it had.
Yeah. I mean, but it's still like Drake is Drake and Take Care is his classic. And to me, like, simple enough, that alone is enough for it to be an honorable mention.
Oh, yes.
Just like the influence it had. Big, right?
It sparked a whole new genre. Drake sparked a whole new genre or sub-genre of artists. Yeah, that went through that were going for this fusion of R&B, and
no doubt.
Because even one of the other honorable mention artists that I would like to bring up is Smino with Black Swan. Like, Smino is a perfect example of someone that does this R&B, even though I would say Smino does it with a more, I wouldn't say contemporary. He'd do it with more traditional flair with the R&B than Drake does. But because a lot of the songs, like Anita or even Amphetamine, even he's rapping, but it feels like a more soulful vibe to it.
Black Swan definitely took that Chicago style we were talking about earlier, and it kind of pushed it more to the soul R&B side than Chance or No Name ever did, right?
Yes, easily.
And I mean, Black Swan, I think that's another one that took people by surprise, because I think people knew Smino at that point. And I mean, he's not even from Chicago, right? He's St. Louis, right? Yeah. I know. I keep, but I always group him with those guys. Yeah.
I think a Ghetto Sage with No Name, Saba, Smino.
Yeah.
It's like 2 or 3 members. Chicago's like that.
Yeah. But I mean, I just remember it took people by surprise because people kind of knew him at that point, but he didn't have any body of work like he did with Black Swan, and it came out. And I think people were like, why aren't we discussing him like we are discussing these other guys?
Definitely agree.
I think one funny one that I know you and I both really wanted to talk about was City Morgue Volume 1, Hell or High Water.
City Morgue Volume 1, Hell or High Water. Now, City Morgue, and speaking of going back to, I guess, with Joey, how we talked about how that was refreshing to hear someone bring back, I guess, more traditional East Coast rap to the forefront.
Yeah.
City Morgue did about the opposite and brought into the fold from New York, two New York rappers, a very interesting take on the fusion of hardcore rock and almost comparable to metal, and very strong metal influences into the hip hop culture, coming from two very young artists.
Yeah, the only 90s guys comparable are Onyx, right?
Yeah.
But even in recent times, Suicide Boys, there's that one
Ghost
group.
Main,
Yeah,
Suicide
Horror,
Boys.
spelled with the 9s.
Yeah.
They're definitely hardcore. And then, of course, a guy who used to roll with them, who's now very famous, 6ix9ine, Tekashi 6ix9ine, right? Like it had been on its way in, but these guys just completely blew it up and brought it.
Yeah, these guys really with Hell or High Water, with songs like Skatehead, with songs like.
Can I tell a story about Skatehead?
Yes,
that's the first City Morgue song I heard.
Really?
Yeah, so there were 3 singles out, right? It was 33rd Black Glass, Shinners, and Skatehead. And Skatehead was the first one I heard, and it was with the music video, of course. And it's kind of like what I said with clipping. The music video adds something to it, right?
Yes.
And I remember just my mind was blown. He talks about the school shooter lyric. That's what everyone remembers, and the music video is crazy. And I was like, I got to listen to more of these guys. And then, I find out, they don't have an album out yet. Yeah. They just had these other singles, these 3 total singles. And then he appeared on Taboo with Denzel Curry and JPEG Mafia. And just Zilla Kami, yeah. And but like the style was just so crazy. Like I just wanted more. And then finally, I shouldn't say finally, because it came out like maybe October of that year. When Hell or High Water came out, it was everything I wanted it to be, right? Because part of you scared, like, are they going to tone it down? But like they amplified it, right? And if anything, when I look at my favorite tracks, obviously I love the 3 singles. I love Skatehead, I love Shinners, I love 33rd Black Glass. But like PTSD, Snow on the Bluff, Nuka-Cola, like those are some of my favorite tracks, and they were all new. Because that's always a big pet peeve, is when the top tracks are just the singles.
So Grave Hop 187, man.
Yeah, Grave Hop.
Man. And honestly, City Morgue also gets more of my props, because I finally seen them in concert for the first time, and man, I'm always curious whenever artists come on, whenever artists perform live, if they are going to bring the same energy, or how their songs are going to translate to a live setting. And they blew it out the water, man. They brought the same energy. The crowd reciprocated that same energy.
There you go.
And 10 out of 10 recommending them. So
that's it.
Yeah.
One that I don't think we have to talk about too much. Section 80, Kendrick Lamar. And spoiler alert, Kendrick Lamar appears in the top 20. like you knew that, right? That's why I say we don't have to talk about it too much. But to me, that was his first huge album. Like, that's the first great album he put out, right?
Right.
And obviously, it gets overshadowed because a year later, he comes out with Good Kid, Mad City. But, this is the album that, in my mind, it's what made him a star. Because it came out, and then he was crowned King of the West Coast by Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and The Game. And it made Black Hippie huge. It made all of the other members huge. Some of his most iconic songs are on there, like High Power, Rigor Mortis, ADHD, Keisha's Song. Yeah. So, great album by a great record, but we have more time to talk about him in the future.
Yes. It's like, it was a great breakout project, even though he had the mixtapes, like the
Overly Dedicated.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the Kendrick Lamar subtitle. But in all these were good had some notable tracks, and Section 80 had some really great standout tracks. I think we could safely say that it was not Kendrick's best work.
Yeah.
And we could probably get onto that later. But going off of the Top Dog family tree, I would like to shout out Sun's Tirade and Cilvia demo.
Mm-hmm.
Either or, because some people like Cilvia demo more, some people like Sun's Tirade more.
I'm a Sun's Tirade guy.
Yeah, personally, I'm a Sun's Tirade guy, but songs like Shot You Down, Kevin Miller, it's like those are great songs off Cilvia demo. And I think Isaiah Rashad is an often overlooked member of the Top Dog family tree.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see what he's going to drop soon and this next decade, because Sun's Tirade had some good cuts on there that were reminiscent of almost older Kendrick and older yay with the soulfulness of the samples,
Yeah.
but with a different type of lyrical approach.
Yeah.
And unique in its own, almost similar to like an IDK and whatnot. But I hope that in the next coming decade, he may release a project that we could say is one of the top of the decade.
Yeah, what cracks me up about Sun's Tirade is the opening skit is the Top Dog guy saying like, hey, where's the album?
Yeah.
And it was 2.5 years between Cilvia demo and Sun's Tirade, and we're at almost 4 years now. So what's the skit gonna be like on his new album? I don't know.
It's gonna be like, yo, what the fuck? If it doesn't start with anything less than that, I'm gonna be disappointed. Yeah.
The last one I had an honorable mention for was Undone by The Roots. That's an old man album, right?
Yeah.
I think Black Thought, he was probably in his late 30s at this point. But, The Roots had been around since the early 90s, right?
Right.
And at this point, they kind of had like a second career push by being the Jimmy Fallon late night band or whatever, right?
Right.
And so I think when this came out, that kind of helped it get some recognition. But I mean, really, it's the music. It had a lot of artistic vision because it was a concept album, right? And that came out at a point where I don't think a lot of concept albums were coming out. Of course, the next year, Good Kid, Mad City came out, right? But at that point, I don't think we were getting a lot of concept albums, especially from old-fashioned rappers, right? And then you get that root style of, the soul kind of folky indie hip hop, right? And just combining it with the concept. I mean, it's a really good concept album too. Like it's got Sufjan Stevens on it too, and then the Big KRIT, the Big KRIT verse. That's a classic. And I don't know. I thought about having it at 20 on my list, but nah.
Yeah, it's like I think it had some strong songs, and it's definitely worthwhile noting. But similar to that, another old man project for two artists, Madlib and Freddie Gibbs with Piñata.
Yeah,
is a very good entry. It's a very strong addition to their catalog, and it's a very strong addition to the decade. But did it outclass and did it bring something? It did outclass the other projects that we have on the list. I can't say that like definitively. I can't say, oh yeah, this Gangsta Gibbs. Even though Piñata has great songs like Deeper, Scarface, Shitsville Thuggin', Robes. It goes on, and the production, Madlib, he doesn't fail in my eyes.
Yeah, when does he ever?
Yeah, so it's very, even though they are great projects, they just weren't. And when we compared our lists and we were compiling the final version of it, it just didn't make the cut.
Yeah. I think there's one group of albums that I want to touch on just a little bit before we wrap things up. And that's albums that didn't make the list, not because of the quality, but because we said it's not hip hop.
Yeah. And I think a good start to that would be the one and the only Malibu by Anderson .Paak.
Yeah.
Because Malibu, granted, Anderson .Paak does rap. He is a talented artist in multiple facets.
He even was in a rap group at one point, right? He was in Hellfire Club with No Can Do, Open Mic, Bus Driver. His name was Breezy Lovejoy at the time, but he was in a rap group even. That he was.
But with his solo projects like Malibu, and even going further down the line, like Oxnard and whatnot, it deviates further and further from being just a rap album to more of a R&B project. I feel like there's albums that we considered during this list making process that blurred the lines between R&B and hip hop, but usually at the end of the day we could definitively say, oh, this is a hip hop or rap album.
Yeah.
Malibu and a lot of Anderson .Paak's projects we felt like ended up on the more of the R&B side of the spectrum than hip hop.
I think he considers himself a singer before he considers himself a rapper also.
I do too.
Yeah.
And along those same lines, I would have to note Trilogy and Frank Ocean's catalog. What Frank Ocean album would you specifically note, or like project?
Well, I mean, Nostalgia Ultra, Channel Orange, Blonde. Like if we were including Frank Ocean, all three would be making a list,
yes,
right? So,
yes.
And then for the weekend, it would be Trilogy, like you said, yeah. But I mean, ultimately, sure, Frank Ocean, he's a part of the hip hop community. Sure, he collaborates with guys like Jay-Z, and yes, he was like Anderson .Paak, he was literally in a rap group. He was in Odd Future, and he's even rapped before on songs. But these albums he puts out, they're not rap albums.
Not at all. And even though The Weeknd does have songs where he does rap, and he does often have, he's often featured on a lot of other rap artists' songs. Usually he's singing, or if he does offer a verse, it's kind of just like a rare occasion. It's nothing. It doesn't reflect the majority of his catalog. Yeah, a lot of the stuff is very, because he does have songs like Snow Child on the most recent project, or like he has songs like The Zone. Is like or even at the second half of Glass House
707.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's very like he's rapping, but that's not his primary thing. So I think artists like them, we had to kind of set aside for this list, even though they have great projects of the past decade.
And we even admit they're a part of the hip hop community.
They are. We love them, accept them, hope they don't go away anytime soon.
Yeah, but
except for Frank, he goes away on his own.
Yeah. We don't know where he's at.
Yeah, no one knows Frank. But I think, before we go, there's one more guy I do have to shout out. He doesn't count in this non-hip hop group, but he is. I gotta give a shout out to this guy named Silk Money.
Let's hear it.
Silk Money he was part of this one rap group, Divine Council. He's a relatively underground guy, and projects like Get the Fuck Off My Dick, There's Not Enough Room for All You Motherfuckers.
That's the full name, right?
That is the full name. They stood out because it was a very interesting approach to a very subdued top. It was a very, Silk Money's projects are dense lyrically, but he's spitting like a toothless camel. The man has, and I think other artists you could probably name a bunch of them that are in this category. Even though they have great projects, even though the projects themselves are good and they're spitting there, it just, I think due to production limitations and also mixing limitations, that even though they do have good bars, even though the songs are good themselves, overall quality wise, we couldn't put them on the list. So would you agree?
Yeah. I like that you had to throw in the Silk Money shout out too, though.
Yeah, shout Silk Money, sock out Kakarot V.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. But I think that wraps us up.
That's everyone, I think.
Yeah. So I think that's about all that we have on the way. So any last remarks for this past 40 ounces of hip hop? 40 ounce hip hop.
It's all about appreciating the music. It's not about the list. It's not about the order. You can maybe it's a little about what did and didn't make the list, but next week when we dive in, just remember it's all about appreciating the music. Yeah,
at the end of the day, this is two guys trying to share and hopefully give you guys a new perspective on some of these albums that you may have heard of, maybe you did not have heard of, and maybe the albums that you have heard of, you may have a newfound appreciation by the time you leave this.
All about appreciating it.
All about it. So signing off, McDank, aka Young Lunar Lord, and my dog
Michael, ZZ, Big Mike.
Yep. See you next time.
See y'all next time.